Owning a boat comes with a number of perks, like being able to say ahoy or land ho and not feel weird about it. So here's another perk. Geico's boat insurance offers access to the largest towing fleet on the water. And with specialist support from agents that are as passionate about boating as you are, there's so much value that you'll want to say, shiver me timbers, and not feel weird about that either. Get more with Geico.
This is Wheelbearings. I'm Dan Roth.
And I'm Sam Abu-Al-Samad.
So welcome to episode 43. There's some electric car stuff. Actually, a bunch of electric car stuff we're going to talk about this week, and maybe not much else. I mean, we'll throw a dash of autonomy in there, right?
Yeah, and some listener questions that came in on Twitter this evening.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
A couple of good ones there.
While you're talking, I'm going to go check out Star Trek. That will all become clear later. Anyway, let's talk about what we're driving and keep it electric. Sam, you're driving the Prius Prime.
Yeah, so I spent last week with the new Prius Prime, which is Toyota's second stab at a plug-in hybrid. And the first attempt, the Prius PHV, which came out in 2011 or 12, I think. I think
it was. It's a while ago. Yeah, and it had like 3 miles of range.
Well, it was a little more than that, but not much. So let me get one thing out of the way first. This is an ugly car, and there's just no getting around it. It's not an attractive car. So having said that, we'll move on beyond the styling.
Well, though, before we move too far from that, do you think that the Prius having, let's be charitable and say, distinctive looks is actually part of the brand?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it has been part of the brand ever since the second generation one. And, I think part of what has helped the Prius, Prius has struggled a little bit in the last few years, as have most hybrids. But, what helped the Prius for, the better part of a decade was the fact that, it had a distinct look that, when you saw it, you knew, the person driving it, was driving a hybrid, cared about, driving green and being efficient. And there's nothing wrong with that, and several times, over the course of the last decade, other automakers, they've taken two approaches to hybrids. One, they put the hybrid hardware in there and made it as indistinct as possible, which is kind of the approach that Ford took with the Fusion hybrid and the Escape hybrid before that. So it didn't look any different, so it was just a normal, looked like a normal driving experience. And then there were those that tried, that gave their hybrids a unique look, that set them apart from the rest of their lineup. For that, the Honda Insight, that came out around 2009, went for a very Prius-like look. The current Hyundai Ioniq, is doing the same thing. To a degree, Ford did that with the C-Max because, they offered that only as a hybrid. And the second and third generation Priuses, they had that sort of egg shape, very aerodynamic shape, but I wouldn't call them ugly. I mean, they weren't pretty. They were really kind of plain, actually.
I thought they were kind of goofy.
Yeah, I mean, they were fairly indistinct,
Sure.
aside from the overall profile.
But so the Prius Prime has, I guess, it's been afflicted with what has kind of taken over all Toyotas and Lexus vehicles of late, is just this trend toward over styling. But beyond that, there are a few really interesting details. Like that rear window on the Prius Prime is fascinating. It's got like a bubble in it.
Yeah, that is actually kind of interesting because it's a compound curve, and it has sort of a valley in the middle of it, so there's like two upward curves, and then it's concave in the middle, which I'm sure, was very carefully crafted in the wind tunnel, to give absolute minimum drag. And the thing that really impressed me about that actually was from inside, you look at it from the outside and it's very obviously, a very complex curvature. But from inside, it has zero distortion. I expected, when I saw it, when I got inside that, the view through that back window would be all warped, but somehow they managed to do it with virtually no distortion at all.
See, that's got to be really tricky to manufacture.
Oh, absolutely.
And then B, they've perfected it.
Yeah.
That's so Toyota.
And the other thing about it too, is that the whole rear hatchback is actually carbon fiber. And there's some other carbon fiber bits around the car as well to reduce weight, to offset the extra poundage of that battery pack. So they did some pretty nifty things in there. Of course, the downside of having that compound curve on the rear hatch is that you can no longer have a rear windshield wiper. So in the rain, the visibility does go down a bit because of the lack of a rear wiper. But aside from that, it works really well.
Yeah, so it sounds like beyond the looks, there's actually a lot about the Prius Prime you're almost making it sound kind of exotic in a way.
In some ways it is. Like I said, they did incorporate some carbon fiber in various places to keep the weight down. It's certainly nothing like the Lexus LFA, but just very strategic use of it to keep the weight down, and so it did well there. And of course, the TNGA platform that they used, starting with the fourth generation Prius that this is based on, and also for the new Camry, it's certainly a much better platform than anything, than what the Prius has ever had before. The driving dynamics are much improved compared to prior generation Priuses. Although, this particular one that I was, the Prime, it rides on 15-inch tires with very low rolling resistance and commensurately low grip. So, in fairly passive driving, it feels fine. It changes lanes without any difficulty. But if you push it hard into a corner, it will understeer like mad. So its limits are pretty low, but as long as you stay within those limits, it's fine. When I drove the previous plug-in Prius, it had this really leaden feel to it. Its dynamics were not good. And this one is definitely much better, with that caveat of, having relatively low maximum grip. But that's largely due to the tires they chose to maximize efficiency.
Sure. And Priuses really have never, from a enthusiast perspective, they've never really been pleasant to drive. They've been squishy and just set up for max economy, so they the low grip kind of tires and this one isn't squishy or anything. Right.
It definitely feels more buttoned down.
Right, and that was what surprised me about the new TNGA Prius and this car as well. I haven't driven the Prime, but it's surprisingly rewarding in a way to drive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So let's see. Oh, the other thing, going back to the original plug-in Prius, that one really always seemed like kind of an afterthought. Like it always seemed like Toyota didn't really have their heart in it with that one. They did it because on the previous second generation Prius, there were so many owners, especially in California. There were several companies that were actually offering conversion kits to make those Priuses, the second generation Priuses, into plug-in hybrids. By just installing an auxiliary battery pack in the rear and tying it into the hybrid system. And there was a fairly significant group of Prius customers that were clamoring for a plug-in hybrid. So it kind of Toyota came into it kind of kicking and screaming. And they put in a fairly small, it was only about a 3.5 kilowatt hour battery pack, or maybe just under 4 kilowatt hours, which isn't very big.
Yeah, and I think it was 13 miles of range actually.
I think the official EPA rating was 11, but that wasn't actually 11 miles of all electric range, or realistically, it was almost impossible to actually get 11 miles of electric range out of it, because one of the issues they had with that one is it didn't really have very much electric power available, traction drive power available. And so, you basically had to just barely touch the accelerator to keep it in electric mode. And if you got into it at all, the engine would turn on, would fire up. So, it could coast along, at speed, 50, 60, 70 miles an hour on electricity, but, just don't try to accelerate because there wasn't enough electric power to accelerate it. As soon as you tried to get any kind of acceleration, the engine would fire up. So you wouldn't be getting a full electric drive in that case.
Well, so, go ahead.
So they, for this one, they really committed to doing a plug-in hybrid right. So what were you going to say?
Well, I was going to say, by that time, if I recall, they played around with, it was the first time they put lithium-ion batteries in the Prius, was that PHEV, because they replaced older chemistry with the smaller lithium-ion battery for more power density. But also, this car, the TNGA, was probably well underway at that point. So rather than derail what they knew was coming, they had to basically sort of feed the beast a little bit, but also, not get too distracted because they knew they had something better coming out in the next few years.
Right. So this one, it's got 8.8 kilowatt hours of battery, and they made some changes to the hybrid drive system. So up until now, all the Toyota and Lexus hybrids have been two motor systems. It had, but they used one motor exclusively as a generator for doing regenerative braking and for charging the battery even from the engine, under certain load conditions. And then the other one was the other motor was used exclusively to provide propulsion. And what they did this time is they added a clutch in there to tie the two motors together, so that under heavier load or moderate load, you would actually be using both motors for propulsion. And so that way you could actually realistically drive the thing in electric only mode. And I think the official EPA rating is 25 miles of electric driving. And, over the course of a week, I'd make several longer trips, and I regularly got 26, 27 miles of electric driving on a charge with that thing. So it was quite impressive. And, because I was getting so much electric driving, just when you add in the around town and the highway driving, I still overall averaged like 90 miles per gallon with the thing.
So were you using the drive coach to help you drive efficiently, or did you find yourself?
No, not at all, really.
I love, I honestly don't know whether to be thrilled that they're including these things, because the Prius isn't the only
stuff.
Yeah, the Prius isn't the only car to have the coaching thing. They, some of them have trees where you add leaves to it. The more efficiently you drive.
Most hybrids have some form of coaching in the interface, to try to help you, be more efficient. I don't have an issue with that.
Yeah, I don't know whether I find it silly because I know how to drive efficiently, or whether it's, I don't want it to be equated like driving with a video game, but I guess we're sort of already there anyway.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people that would like that extra coaching, especially, if they're new to hybrids and, they want to figure out the best way to utilize it to get the most out of it. In pretty much all these cases, you can usually reconfigure the cluster. You can have the coaching there or turn it off and display something else. So I don't see that as an issue. If you like it, great, use it. If you don't, no big deal.
Right. Ignore it. I like to get offended about things that I could just ignore.
You?
And then I
be
just
offended? Offended by trivial shit?
Yeah. And then I could just spend a couple of hours blustering about it. I've gotten a lot more zen.
That's why we do this show.
What did you think of that big 11-inch portrait mode tablet thing in the middle?
Yeah, that's my other big complaint about this car. you may have at some point in the past, if you've ever heard me talk about user interfaces in cars, complain that touchscreens don't belong in cars. As long as we still have to drive them, touchscreens don't belong in cars. And this one proved yet again that they don't. It's just bad. The volume controls are capacitive touch buttons on there. There is a volume control on the steering wheel, but all the climate controls and everything, it's all touch interface. And I did not like it. I didn't like it. I didn't like it in the Tesla. I don't like it in this one. I didn't like it, in any other car that's ever had it. That's just, that's my bugaboo.
It's not just yours, because it's the same thing as mine. It's a consistent complaint. I feel like a broken record, but it's a hazard. And I wish there were more studies, or at least there was more publicity given to research about this. Like, it's a distraction, and you're asking for a lot of cognitive ability and attention just to do simple things.
Yeah, and the thing is, it has come up a lot, over the last 5 or 6 years through things like the JD Power quality surveys, Consumer Reports reliability surveys. In fact, that one just came out today, the new one. Complaints about the infotainment systems, and it's usually the ones that have the most touch centric interfaces that get the most complaints. People buy them, in some cases they buy them because they want the car and they have no other choice.
Right, I was going to say, you don't really have a choice.
Yeah, but in some cases where they've been optional, like with the My Ford Touch stuff, or in the even in some cases where you don't have a choice, in some, people look at them and say, wow, that looks cool. It's just like my smartphone, it looks very high tech, and they buy it and then they realize that it's not so good. And a lot of manufacturers, over the last 3 or 4 years have started to move away from that and revert back to using at least some degree of physical controls, especially for the climate control and, the radio tuners and volume controls and things like that. So we're getting a mix of physical and, tactile and touch controls, trying to find the right balance there. As we get towards automated driving, it'll be less of an issue because, it won't matter if you're looking away from the road. But right now, when we do still have to drive, that cognitive load from having to look over at the screen and figure out where the touch targets are is not good.
Yeah, and I don't know that this is ever going to get sort of fully solved. And I understand the bind that automakers are in. They're selling a product that has to sort of keep up with convention, and there's a cost benefit to it as well, and weight savings when we're talking about something like the Prius, and just updating functionality. And like, there are reasons for it that I understand. I just don't think we're there and fully baking this interface. And that, we've been spoiled for 25, 30, maybe even 40 years, maybe even a little bit more of really sort of well-refined ergonomics. From the late 60s on, stuff got a lot less funky, sort of a lot more universally standardized, because there was a lot of energy put into, human factors and safety. But you think back before that, like some of the cars from the 50s, they had a lot of weird crap going on. So maybe we're kind of seeing another echo of that era.
Yeah, no, that absolutely, and increasingly manufacturers, they want to find ways to differentiate their products from all the other cars that are on the road, because in so many ways, they've become more common, more commodified, and so they want to find a way to give their vehicles a unique look. And one of the places they can do that is in the HMI, the user interface in the vehicle. But unfortunately that they haven't been very good at that. And, even Tesla, who, Tesla fans have praised that big screen in there, but, I think it sucks. It's terrible.
Yeah. I mean, I have my reasons for my preferences, and I've stated them before, but that's a lot of light to put in a cabin when you're talking about night driving
too, yeah.
And we can do a whole episode about it. And we should, I guess, at some point. But it's an ongoing issue. And it's an image conscious industry. You want to make something that people are going to buy. So hopefully everybody can join our backlash and say, I want buttons and manual transmissions, and we'll have perfect cars.
You know what? Sometimes when you complain about that sort of thing, the automakers do listen, and they will make changes. I mean, Ford's done it with their Sync 3. They've gone back to more physical controls. Honda did it, bringing back the volume knobs and tuning knobs on their audio systems. So they do listen.
Yeah, and they're in a terrible bind.
It'll take a few years, but they get there.
They're in a terrible bind. And I also don't believe that the whole idea that automakers don't know how to do tech. I think that's nonsense. They certainly do, and they have a lot of constraints that makes their tech what it is.
Yeah, and that's the thing that a lot of people don't really understand. And I mean, from a purely engineering standpoint, the fact that they've managed to make this stuff work even as well as flawed as it is, that they've managed to make it work as well as it does, given the cost constraints that they have and all the other constraints in terms of the environmental conditions where automotive electronics have to work, from temperature extremes, vibration, and everything else, things that phone manufacturers and computer manufacturers don't have to worry about. Those are real issues in the automotive environment. And so, and because there's so much electronics packed into modern cars, another big issue they have to deal with is electromagnetic interference. And as you electrify the car and put hybrid and battery electric powertrains in there, that only makes it worse. And so trying to make this stuff work at all is really challenging. So, not to cut them slack, that certainly the user interface designs should be better, but everything else considered, just be happy that it does anything at all.
Yeah, I mean, basically these things are more sophisticated than the Apollo capsules, and they're supposed to work for 12 years.
Yeah,
plus. So I mean, a little bit of a good job and a pat on the back, I think, is deserved, but we're not there in terms of interface. Like, let's just move on now.
Yep.
So I've had, because of the time we're recording this, I'm kind of had an overlap of a couple of cars. But last week we teed it up a little bit. We talked about the visceral experience of the vehicle I was driving last week.
Oh, yes.
So I had a Mitsubishi.
Visceral is not always a good thing, I take it.
No. I had a Mitsubishi Mirage GT. And so I've had this car before, not this one, but I've had the Mirage before. And, I've thought of it as a fish out of water in an automotive sense. It's always struck me as a car that's sold here, but it's really hasn't been designed with the U.S. in mind. So then I started thinking, like, okay, where does it belong? It's definitely at home as a city car. So in an urban environment, Boston, for example, if I lived in the city, especially if I lived in some place as tight as the North End, great, right at home in a tight city like that, and in European cities especially that are even tighter. Yeah, it's there. They call it the Space Star. It's not the Mirage there. It's the Space Star. But even among that class of cars, the Mirage is not competitive. Have you driven a Mirage?
No, I have not had the
the honor
the honor of driving a Mirage.
Okay.
The last Mitsubishi I drove was the Outlander Sport.
Okay. Yeah. So it's got all of that mediocrity plus some. I mean, this is a car that shares a class with the Kia Rio, the Fiat Panda, the VW Up, and I think in Europe the Skoda Citigo, and the Mazda 2. I think the Ford Fiesta is the same class. Mm-hmm. So all of those
B-segment cars.
Yeah, all of those better choices. And it's kind of a shame because there is this certain charm to the Mirage. Like it gives me this impression that it's trying hard. Or maybe it's just trying to spend time in it. I don't know. It's small, it's light, so it feels kind of responsive because of that. And that's about where it ends. I mean, Mitsubishi has done their best to erase any kind of playfulness or driving enjoyment. I thought the steering was really weird. Like you can feel the assist turning on and off as you turn the wheel a couple of degrees off center. CVT is the only transmission available unless you have the base level. So I had that wonderful Jatco CVT in the GT. It is so bad in this car. It does the CVT thing, it multiplies torque at low speeds, and that's noticeable. And the 3-cylinder engine, I think, puts in a commendable performance. It's actually not super tiny. It's 1200 cc, so 1.2 liters. That's kind of big for a 3-cylinder. It's not turbocharged or anything, so it's like 72 horsepower. It's not bad for an engine that size, but it's. I don't think there's any balance shafts on it, or if there are, they're not effective because it's very, very rough. It reminded me of a sort of like a demented V6 with the rhythm that it runs at, and it does snarl. Like I found myself to be entertained, I would just put my foot into it and just bury it and wait. And it's like it's like a golf cart. It's essentially it's the same kind of thing as a golf cart. That's what it's like to drive with that sort of slippy transmission, and you put your foot down and you go, and then when you're up to speed, you let your foot off, and it just sort of slows back down. I could not help but think how much better this would be, even with like a 3 or a 4-speed conventional auto or the manual. And I really wanted to try it with the manual, but they don't offer it. So
you can actually get the manual in the SE as well.
Oh, can you?
Yeah, you can get it in the ES and the SE, but not in the GT.
Oh, that's too bad. I mean, because the GT, I thought the engine was one of the high points just for its sort of novelty factor. The GT is really well equipped for what it is. You get a lot of equipment. It had actually one of the better infotainment systems I've tried in recent Mitsubishi, and they keep upgrading those just about every year, and they're simple, so it's like a head unit upgrade. But this one it worked better. There's a lot of noise in this one for the road noise for the hands-free system to deal with, but I really couldn't complain about that. I thought it paired up to my phone a lot more easily than other Mitsubishis, and so it worked fine. But it has power windows, power locks, which okay, those sound like 90s level features, but it's a B segment car, right? It's a basic car, and it makes no pretense about that, really. The AC system is surprisingly great. There's push button starting, there's keyless entry. The headlights are either HID or LED in this trim. I don't know. They were very good, actually.
They're HID, 539 HIDs.
They're very good. They're effective, which is important, I think, in any car.
Absolutely.
And had nice alloy wheels. It has geek factor stuff to like too.
Hey, it says it's got a front seat heater.
Yeah, it did. It had heated seats. Yep. And it's when you look into the history of, not the history, but just sort of like, okay, what are they trying to do here? Low weight was a priority in their design, so there's a lot of high strength steel in the structure. It makes a pretty rigid unibody, and it's true. It didn't feel floppy, so that apparently worked. I was surprised to find out it has a really low coefficient of drag. It's under 0.3. Aerodynamically, that's pretty good. And let's see. That's about it. There's lots and lots of body roll, very, very little grip. And it's got that sort of small car trying to feel big ride, so it's kind of squishy. It is roomy for what it is.
How's fuel efficiency?
Not good. I got like 31 miles per gallon combined. I mean, you can get a big old Camry to do that.
Yeah.
So,
Civic does better than that.
Yeah. Maybe that's just because
And it's got 100 more horsepower.
Right. And that's maybe my thinking is like I did a highway commute that was, some stop and go, but there were other times where I had to get up to speed and I had to maintain 80 miles an hour. So otherwise I would get squashed. It's not made for that. It'll do it and it won't really complain about it. You just have to be patient and plan ahead if you're making moves. So in that sense, it's one of those cars that it's really at home in a sort of moderately low speed, 50 mile an hour tops kind of city environment. It's really good there. It has a tight turning radius. It's easy to park. I did love that. I was able to tuck it into the garage with no problem at work. But it's not real at home in sort of that big old open road American environment. And it's not really what it's made for. But so the biggest issue I had with it is that in GT trim, I mean, if you've got the site open there, it's over $18,000.
Wow. That's quite a bit for a car like, of the spec.
It's a little funky looking. Interior materials are not competitive. It feels plasticky and it feels like, this class of car from 20 or even 25 years ago.
Looks like it does have some contrast stitching on the seats, though.
Yes. The seats were not the lowest point. I mean, the interior plastics are they just look cheap.
The steering wheel rim looks suitably thick.
I love how you're reaching.
I'm trying not to be Mr. Negativity.
No, but I'm trying not to be negative too, because I feel like this is a car that is again like not for this market, but then in other markets where there's other cars, there's other choices, and this segment of vehicle is more popular. The choices are still better. I mean, let's take another car that you can get like everywhere, right? Like the Rio. When I looked it up, the Rio has almost twice the horsepower. I think the engine is like 130 horsepower, so it's almost twice the horsepower, and it's only like 400 cc bigger. So wow, I mean, I guess this is a 1.2, that's a 1.6, 400 cc with engines this small. That's a pretty significant difference, but still, it's going to be pretty efficient.
The problem with cars like this, where they have been built down to a price point is, you kind of wonder, it's like, why buy something like this new when you can buy something quite a bit better that, just a couple of years old?
$18,000 buys you a lot of car.
Right. I mean, back, I don't know, maybe 2010 or something, I did, when I'm, still writing for Autoblog, I did a review of the Chevy Aveo, which was their small car before the Sonic. The Sonic's a pretty decent car. The Aveo was not. And, that car at the time, this was 7 years ago, with automatic transmission and a leatherette upholstery on the seats, that thing came to over $17,000.
Right.
And, at the time, in my summary at the end of the review, I said, you could buy this car for $17,000, or you could buy a 2-year-old Honda Fit Sport for about, a little less money, actually. And you'd have a hell of a lot better car with the 2-year-old Honda than you would with that Aveo. And I get, I think the same thing applies here.
Yeah.
You could buy, a couple-year-old Fiesta or Rio
or a Fit
or a Fit, for something the same or less money, and you'd have a far better car.
Yeah, but
and you'd still have probably a year of warranty left on it.
Yeah. That's true, and that's sort of the most compelling argument, I think, against these cars is that something that's already gone down the depreciation curve. Because when you're at this point, I don't know that you're real concerned about. I mean, the warranty plays a factor, but $18,000, that you're compromising, so you might as well compromise a little on the warranty coverage and sort of putting those first miles on it and get something that is just, overall a more versatile car, a little better. But even if you're buying new, like 18 grand, like that's not an insignificant price. And the other cars that are built to the same price they're just better. The Rio, well, I'll come back to that. The Rio is just more comfortable. It's better to drive. It's got easier to use technology that's more sophisticated. It's quieter inside. We used to talk about cars like this as a penalty box. The Mirage definitely is a penalty box, and maybe one of the few that you can still buy new. I think the only other one I can think of is the Versa.
Yeah.
And I'd still rather have the Versa, especially the Versa Note. And for, you don't gain any fuel economy, like I found. It just fuel economy didn't come out in daily driving to anything impressive. So I'm not buying it. I don't think anybody else should either, which I kind of hate to say.
So I'm looking at the Honda site right now. A 2018 Fit LX. That's the base level Fit with a CVT. Comes including delivery comes to $17,900.
Right.
So and that's a better car.
It is. I mean, you'll probably give up some features if you start to compare between a Fit LX and a Mirage GT, but overall, you're making a better buy.
It's worth it.
Yeah. The Fit is a formidable competitor. But sort of, and that's in between that B and C segment. Just the way that car has a carved out interior and clever packaging. So for a palate cleanser, I'm now driving a Golf Alltrack, and Volkswagen makes a really good car. Really, I love this thing.
Okay. Prior to getting our Civic, we had the predecessor of this car, which was the Jetta Sportwagon. And this car, the Jetta Sportwagon was always, was only ever badged as a Jetta in North America. Everywhere else in the world, it was the Golf Sportwagon. And, what you've got, the Golf Alltrack, is the successor to that. They've gone back and, they dropped the Jetta badging and they call it a Golf here now as well. And so the Alltrack is the slightly taller,
right, all-wheel
drive version, right? The sport utility version.
Right. And I would prefer the regular wagon without the cladded sort of pretension. But whatever. It has all-wheel drive. It's pretty well thought out. It's comfortable. It drives really well. I think the word I would use is tidy. And I was thinking about this morning. From a normal car buyer's perspective, that's you're spending your hard-earned money on one car that has to fill a lot of needs. I think that's why I like it so much. It's fantastic. It's got great cargo space. You're going to get better economy than a crossover. It's lower to the ground, which I think is a plus. Could be a minus, depending on your point of view. And just, it's got good space. And there's even a USB port in it, finally.
Yes. Yeah. The VW has finally given in and ditched their proprietary connector that they had and put in a proper USB port. Last year, I think they started doing that. And the Golf wagon, in either Alltrack or sport wagon shape, it's a really handsome shape, and it gives you the driving dynamics of a car, with a whole bunch of extra room inside for, whatever gear you want to throw in there. And I haven't looked at the specific numbers, but I think at least compared to the previous generation Tiguan, I think they just recently started selling a new Tiguan here. But compared to the previous generation Tiguan, it had more room inside than the Tiguan. So it was a more useful car. without, and like you said, the only thing you're really giving up is that high ride height, and that vision. But it's funny. I was earlier today. I was recording a segment with Daron Levine for his Sirius XM show, and we were talking about wagons versus utilities. And I mentioned, when everybody's driving an SUV, to try and get that higher ride height, and the extra visibility. Does anybody actually have any extra visibility?
You're right. It's sort of like if everybody's tall, nobody's tall.
Exactly.
Kind of thing.
So at that point, you might as well go back to a car.
Yeah, and I mean, I overall like it leaves such a good impression because, like you said, I think it's slick and clean looking. It's not a real ornamented design, which works really well, and Volkswagen tends to do that really well. The materials are nice, and even the door pockets have like a little bit of carpeting in them or like felt material. So there's nice touches.
What trim level do you have?
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head. It's not the top trim. I think it's leatherette seats. It doesn't have nav, but it has some sort of infotainment system where I can stream podcasts. So I've been doing that.
I think the VTEX is only available on the SEL, which is the top trim level.
Okay, hang on a second. I was surprised that it didn't have nav.
No, sorry, you can get the VTEX as an option on the SE.
It must be the SE.
Yeah, and that VTEX material that they use, that leatherette material that Volkswagen has is actually a really nice material. We had that on our Jetta, and it looks good and it's quite durable. So as an alternative to leather, I think it's a really good choice.
Yeah, and so I was trying to think of things that Dan doesn't like, like things I hate, and I couldn't come up with too many. There's a proximity sensor in the new infotainment system. So as you get close to it with your hand, it sort of changes the display a little bit. It pops up little other menu items and stuff. And that never fails to annoy me.
That's actually unusual to find, in a car at this price point. I mean, up until now, only, much more premium cars have had stuff like that.
Right. Like Q is what I think the first time I dealt with a proximity sensor. But what messes me up is like you're going for something and it changes right as you get to it. It's like, damn it.
That is a problem. But
they've done it smartly, like the actual the button that you may be aiming your finger for, the touch targets, they actually grow as they sense your finger is coming in to give you a better chance of actually hitting your target. So beyond cranky old man, they've tried to do it better. And it has this feature, like the Subaru I had a couple of weeks ago had it too. It turns on the fog lights as you're cornering. I know they're trying to be helpful, but it puts light in the wrong place and it's a distraction as you're trying to pay attention to looking into your turn. So stop it, or at least let me shut it off. That was about all I could think of in terms of stuff I really dislike. It has that good Volkswagen driving experience. I don't know about what happens in the long-term ownership experience, like what blows up.
That's the problem.
Yeah, and it's not really fair, I guess, but in a way it is to bring that up.
Yeah, I mean, we own two VWs over, for covering 16, 17 years. And, the driving experience was always great. The ownership experience, not so much. So that's why we don't have another VW right now.
Right. It seems to me my experience with European cars, not Volkswagen specific, but in general as a breed, and other people I've, know and am related to and stuff, they've had Volkswagens. And it seems like the pattern is you'll get through 60 to 80,000 miles relatively trouble-free.
That's about it. So around that 60,000 mile mark is where things start to. That's a good time to sell.
Right. Then they get needy and annoying, weird, expensive stuff breaks.
Very expensive.
Okay.
Ours had the panoramic moonroof. Does yours have that?
No, this one doesn't.
Okay. So we had the panoramic moonroof on our wagon. And there's a shade, motorized shade that goes back, so when you close it, if it's really sunny out, You can close it, and it's perforated, so you still get some light coming through it, but it's less intense. And you can motor it back, and if it's cold out, but you want the sunshine, you can just open that up, and you still have the glass roof. Great. At about 57,000 miles, one day my wife was opening it up, and it got about halfway back, and one side kept going, and the other side stopped. And so the thing got all twisted up, and henceforth would not move any further. And the thing got ripped, and along one side. And I started researching. Okay, how much is this going to cost me to fix? Can I fix it myself? The parts alone were $500. Taking it to a dealer to fix it would have been about $1,500 because they have to take the entire headliner.
Headliner.
So there's all kinds of labor involved. And at that point, we they had already done ours was a TDI, and they had already announced the settlement, and we knew we were going to be doing the buyback. And so I said, okay, to heck with that. Just got out a knife, took what was left of it off, and went to AutoZone and got some window tint film, and put extra window tint film on the inside of the glass, so that it wouldn't get too overwhelming, and just left it at that because it wasn't worth fixing it for $1,500.
Yeah,
and all that was the fabric shade that motors back and forth. It's crazy, So it's this bizarre dichotomy, of it's so great to drive, but it's such a pain in the ass to own.
And you know what? Let's move on to topics, and let's stay with premium European cars.
Okay.
Because this week we all got to see what Polestar has turned into, and apparently their first car is going to be their first car of their new evolution or whatever they want to do. They are now the standalone electric performance brand under the Volvo umbrella. So they've basically made a S90 coupe, and it looks
the profile. It's actually got a lot of Mustang in it.
Yeah, I was gonna say it looks like Volvo coupes have always looked a little overly chunky, but also really striking at the same time. And I mean, Volvo has gone from this sort of place where they really, in terms of the cars they sell, they sort of share this chunk of the market with like Acura, right? Like, so they're sort of a player in this valley between just your normal brands, the premium trim level of your normal sort of Ford, Chevy, Toyota, whatever, and the prestige brands like Mercedes and BMW. They've always sort of been in that middle area,
that uncanny valley.
Yeah. They've, in the last couple of years, they have really evolved what Volvo means. They're leading in style. I mean, it doesn't matter what price they charge. The cars all look like $1 million inside and out.
I have to say that under Geely's ownership, Geely has been an amazingly good steward of the Volvo brand since they acquired it from Ford in 2010.
Yeah.
I mean, they have given them the resources they need to completely revamp their product line in a way that they never really got to do under Ford's ownership. And it's paid off. I mean, it's working, for the most part, really well. The SPA architecture that they use for the 90 series, the 60 series, and now the Polestar 1 is a really impressive setup. And there's a lot of interesting stuff about this car.
Yeah, it's first of all the fact that it's an electric performance hybrid 2-door. They're sort of like following the Tesla model, if you will, of rolling out the electrified car as a premium model. And I know that this is sort of their electrification strategy that they announced. They've been masterful at timing their press releases and wording their press releases.
Yeah.
And this is sort of like just an extension of that. But it's also just really impressive to see it happening. And because they've gone with electrification, Polestar has always meant performance, and there's no shortage of that with electric powertrain if you tune it that way. And it sounds like they certainly have, given that it's got like 600 horsepower and it was 1,000 Newton meters of torque or something. It's gonna perform quite all right.
Yeah, it'll do okay. I'll be curious to see, in the real world, how customers accept this thing, because first of all, the 600 horsepower comes, from the combination of, I think it's the engine itself is about 400, is just shy of 400 horsepower. And then you've got 3 electric motors, 2 at the back and 1 at the front, that are, adding to that, adding another almost 200. And so when the battery is depleted, the battery's only got about 90 miles of all electric range. So first of all, you're not going to get 600 horsepower in all electric mode. The 600 horsepower is going to come in hybrid mode with the engine and the motors. And then once the battery is depleted, you're also not going to get 600. You're still going to get, like almost 400, but because it's a further upgraded version of the 2-liter turbocharged and supercharged engine that they have in the S90 and XC90 T6,
which is surprisingly linear and punchy. And
oh yeah, it's a great engine.
It feels so much bigger than it is. That engine is like a triumph of technology over displacement.
Yeah, no, it certainly is. And so I'll be curious to see what customers think of this thing, because the actual times when you have that 600 horsepower output available, granted, you're not actually going to use 600 horsepower very often, right, especially in a car like this. But, there will be limits on when you have that full power available.
Us automotive journalists are going to try to use it all the time.
That's what we do.
Yeah. The other details of this car are also sort of like equally intriguing. They say it's got a carbon fiber body, so I don't know whether that means the whole body's carbon fiber or like what. From reading the materials, it looks like about 50% of the SPA architecture is carried over. That's Volvo's scalable platform architecture, and then about half of the structure is replaced with carbon fiber and other materials. So there's carbon fiber in part of the structure, especially in the back of the car. The body skins are carbon fiber, and a lot of the upper structure is carbon fiber, and then mixed in with steel and aluminum from the SPA. And in conjunction with that's a pretty advanced body, I guess, too. They're rolling out a new Öhlins chassis control system. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of tech here. The thing that stood out the most to me is possibly one of the smallest details. They're using phone as key.
Yeah, well, that's they're actually not the first to do that. Let's see, Tesla actually offers that right now. You can use your phone as the key, and there's somebody else who's bringing it out this year. Can't think of who it is right now, but basically, what it's doing is using Bluetooth LE from your phone, so Bluetooth low energy from your phone. So your phone acts as the key fob.
So what if on those days where my phone dies before I leave work, and I can't charge it, what happens then?
Well, then you'll have to reach for the fob.
Okay, so you'll actually have a fob. Okay, that's fine.
I would assume that they will give you a fob as well.
I would hope so. You just hope that you don't leave it at home.
Yeah.
No, it sounds like they're using this to sort of roll out a bunch of technology that's going to actually inform the next car, which is the full battery, the Polestar 2. Right. Be the battery electric. It'll be more of like a Tesla Model 3 competitor, so it'll have a lower price. Although it sounds like you're actually not buying The Polestar one.
Apparently this will only be available through the Care by Volvo program, which is the subscription program we talked about a few weeks ago when they launched the XC40. So you'll sign up for essentially it's a sort of a lease program, but you get to upgrade periodically to newer models of the car. I think every year, every 2 years, you can upgrade without just stay on your subscription plan. And then it'll include all the maintenance and insurance and things like that.
So that makes me wonder how many they're actually going to make. It's just that weird thing. Like, okay, so who owns the cars then? If you're subscribing to them, right? So then it's a test bed. What is it like? It's
I think it is. Especially this one. I think is really more of a test bed for a lot of new technologies like the carbon fiber and some of the propulsion technologies that they're using. And the other thing about this is it's being built in China. It's not going to be built in Sweden like other Volvos.
Yeah, and that honestly that doesn't bother me at all. I mean, especially for Geely, picking up Volvo. Volvo has experience setting up factory spaces, automotive production spaces around the world. They had a plant, I think, in Halifax, for a while.
long time ago. But I mean that one was just building complete knockdown kits, so they were shipping over kits from Sweden and doing final assembly there.
But I think they also did Australia and Netherlands, and so they know a bit about it.
Right. So, Volvo's got a new plant under construction in South Carolina right now. It's going to build XC90s and S90s. And then they've got this new plant in China that is going to be dedicated for building Polestar cars. I mean, given the amount of carbon fiber in this thing, having the subscription option is probably the only way that they're going to, keep the price, keep the cost down to a manageable level.
Yeah. Putting it in China, building it in China, probably, to me, that seems smart just because I think that's where you're going to find a lot of the people that subscribe to the car. I guess that's the phrase we're going to use now. They've got a population that is looking for transportation. And, that's sort of an untapped, not fully untapped, but it's a market that's more receptive to alternative, not ownership, but just alternative ways of buying into mobility, I guess, if I'm going to torture some phrases. And again, like the ordering and configuration of cars, they say is like it's an online thing. So I'm scratching my head. Like, wait, you're going to order it and configure it, but you're going to then subscribe to it with the Care by. I don't get like.
Yeah, you order it online just as today you do with the Tesla. When your car's ready to be built, you go online, you configure it, and then you lock that in, and that's what they build for you, and then you go pick it up at the Tesla store.
Right, they're doing that exact thing, and making Polestar spaces.
Yeah, this is going to be basically the same thing, except your monthly payment, instead of being a traditional loan payment or even a lease payment, is an all-inclusive monthly payment. For a 2. So I'm looking at it now again, a 2 or 3 year subscription. And that includes, all the maintenance and insurance and everything. And as well as the features like pickup and delivery for servicing and the ability to rent alternative vehicles within the Volvo and Polestar range.
Okay.
All incorporated in the monthly payment. So, for example, if you needed an XC90 for a weekend trip, for a road trip, you could get that, as an alternative to your Polestar.
So it's not, I guess what I'm getting confused is it almost sounded to me like it's really a car sharing setup, but it doesn't sound like that's what it is.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's not car sharing because the car that you get, that's your car. I mean,
and so then that's separate, like
Volvo owns it or whoever is handling their financing owns it, just as with a lease. But yeah, you get that one car for the 2 or 3 year subscription period.
And then that XC90 that you borrow or whatever is like that's part of a smaller rental.
Right, that's the sharing part.
Right. Okay. I get it now. So those are all really on their own. They're somewhat momentous, and to roll them all together, like the car is certainly the figurehead of the story, but overall, all of those other things I think add up to something that's a much bigger change coming for Volvo when they do launch the Polestar 2, and even just for normal, bent metal Volvo cars. They're trying to figure out how they fit in the future economy, especially as a small niche automaker. And so this is fascinating to watch.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So we'll have to keep an eye on that. Let's move to another topic.
All right.
Because I don't have anything more to say about Volvo at this point.
Okay, so another new car was also revealed today, and that's the Audi A7. Which, second generation A7.
Yeah, looks like the first generation, only nicer.
Yeah, a little more muscular. A little more bulging fenders, and it's got the revised front fascia that we saw on the new A8 a month or two ago, and I mean. Like the previous A7, it shares its platform with the A8. I mean, it's basically mechanically, it's basically a 5-door hatchback A8.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
No, not at all. It's, so you have the same powertrains, same 48 volt electrical system as the A8. So that's, these cars will probably be the first to hit the U.S. market with 48 volt electrical systems. And we've talked about that before, so they're mild hybrids. We don't need to rehash that. What's going to be interesting is this new infotainment system, this new generation MMI that they're doing on the A8 and the A7, and presumably on all their other upcoming models, which dispenses with the old rotary control knob and goes to dual touchscreens with haptic feedback.
Why? Audi has been
everybody
really
wants
pushing
to be Tesla.
Yeah, well, Audi has also been forcing screens. Like they got the screens as your dashboard, which I mean that's an okay idea, but they've made it awfully gimmicky. So instead of gauges, they have pictures of gauges. I don't know. Maybe it's people are used to it, but we just talked about this. That's bound to be a crappier experience.
Yeah, I suspect, I'm pretty sure it will be, but we'll have to wait and see, and hope Audi sends us one to drive, and we'll let you know. But I'm not optimistic about that. The rest of the car, though, I'm definitely very optimistic.
It's a beautiful car. It's some of the awkwardness of the current A7 is gone. The A7. It looked striking when it first came out, and now it looks a little weird. I don't know. From certain angles, it just doesn't look graceful. Where this car, I mean, we're seeing it in press photos, so yeah, it certainly does look its best. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, the cockpit it looks beautiful in photos.
I'm just like I say, I'm just wondering how actually usable that system is going to be.
Right, and that's what I was just going to say. It looks beautiful, but I'm not sure how the screens are going to look after I punch them. No, that's not true. I don't actually punch screens. Please send your cars. All right, it's going to have the full range of power trains and all kinds of other variants, and the S7 is going to be the one to look at, see how powerful and fast that is. So I'm sure it's going to be bonkers.
One thing that's interesting, I saw a couple stories this evening that apparently Audi is not going to use their new naming system for its U.S. market cars.
Oh, I did see that because we put up such a fight because it's stupid and confusing.
No, it's not.
So you get the A755 TSI or whatever versus the A7. I forget what their other sort of. I don't know.
I mean, here what Audi's been doing for the last, dozen years or so, or however long, is, they've had the model names, A7, S7, RS7, and so on, indicating the various levels of performance. And then, you've had the nomenclature for the numbering, indicating the engine size. But they've had, for example, 3.0 TFSI for gas engines, boosted a 3-liter V6 boosted gasoline engine, and then TDI for the diesel. And but the TFSI, except on the 3-liter V6, the TFSI is actually supercharged, not turbocharged. And on everything else where I call it a TFSI, it's supercharged, or it's turbocharged. And there's all kinds of nonsense. And so what they came up with in Europe, because especially now as they're transitioning over to adding more hybrids and plug-in hybrids and electrification, they wanted to have something more consistent, that crossed all these different types of powertrains. And so they came up with a scheme that they would put a number that goes in increments of 5. So starting at 20 or 25, 30, 35, and so on, that indicates the, is it the kilowatt?
I was going to say, I think it's kilowatts or kilowatt hours or something like that.
Yeah, basically it indicates the power level in kilowatts.
Although I don't know, 55 kilowatts seems low.
Forget exactly what it was. Maybe it's kilowatts per liter is what it is. No, because it's not that, because that won't work for electric. but basically, regardless of what the absolute number means, anything that was a 55 had approximately the same performance level. So whether it was a plug-in hybrid or a battery electric or a diesel or a gasoline engine, if it had 55, it had the same output. And if it's 40, it had the same output. So you could compare across, because a 3-liter TDI is going to have different performance from a 3-liter TFSI, and then an electric version is going to be something else entirely. So this gives you a way to say, okay, I want this level of performance with electrification. So I want a 55 e-tron, or a 55 TFSI for a gas engine, whatever. So that was the scheme they came up with, which I think when you start factoring in, the electrified powertrains, it actually makes sense to do that.
Okay. So I'm convinced, it's another level of nonsense, but it's no less nonsense than what they've already got going on. It's abstracted away from the specific engine size, but the specific engine size is not relevant anymore. Especially when you look at what the other German manufacturers are doing. Mercedes. The E63. It used to be that an E63 was a 6.3 liter V8. Right.
Now an E63 is a twin turbo 4 liter V8.
Right. So none of it, the world is upside, up is down, down is up. Yeah. It's fine. It's a lovely car. It looked in the press photo of it in silver from the rear 3/4. That is a pretty looking car.
It certainly is.
All right. So what our next topic? We had Mobileye.
Let's skip that one.
Oh, you want to skip that? Okay. Mobileye came up with some math that. Yeah.
Let's go to. We'll come back to Mobileye in a couple of weeks because I'm actually going to be going out to California in mid-November to talk with the Mobileye and Intel folks, and I want to noodle over this stuff a little more before we get back into that. So. Let's talk a little Tesla.
What the hell is going on in Tesla?
Lots of people losing their jobs.
Yeah, but they're trying to build the electric Camry now. It seems like a real bad time to just get rid of a bunch of people. And like you were saying before we started the podcast, their cover story is kind of weird.
It certainly is. Every company of any notable size, generally does performance reviews on employees every year. Usually on an annual basis. Sometimes it's a little less consistent than that. At least some of my jobs it has been. But in general, most companies do performance appraisals on a yearly basis, and that gets used to decide if you're going to get promoted or get a raise and things like that, or bonuses. And Tesla is no different in that respect. And apparently, they employees get rated on a 1 to 5 scale, just like your Uber and Lyft drivers. But apparently this year, Tesla decided to fire several hundred employees en masse over the last couple of weeks, which is somewhat unusual. I've seen, I've over the last 27 years, I've had lots of performance appraisals from, a bunch of different companies that I've worked for over the years. And, I've seen people who've gotten better appraisals and not so good appraisals. And, every once in a while you'll see, maybe 1 or 2 people get let go, but I've never seen them fire hundreds of people at one time based on their performance appraisals.
Yeah, no, that's called layoffs.
Yes.
And
no, Tesla doesn't do layoffs.
Okay, so that's what's going on then. they're
It's like Tesla does not offer discounts on their cars, but that's a whole nother story.
So they're calling their layoffs not layoffs, but they're layoffs because
They don't build pre-production cars.
No, all they build are pre-production cars. I have a really tough time believing that 1 to 2% of your workforce is that bad. Like, I guess, that's like 400 to 700 people.
At least.
And so, okay, if your workforce is that bad, maybe that explains why they're not getting the Model 3 out like they're supposed to, I suppose. But when you're trying to launch that car, you're now going, it just doesn't hold water, because from a management perspective, right, you're going from people who have at least been trained and they're there and they've been, sort of indoctrinated in some way. You put them on a performance improvement plan, and if they're not good,
Right. Well, and the other thing is, if you've got this many people that are getting such low ratings all at one time and needing to be fired, that's, to me, that's a sign of a more serious problem. If in fact you have that many people that are not up to the task,
right,
in the company, that's a sign that your upper management is actually not very good, because they're hiring the wrong people and they're doing the wrong things.
Right. It's not them, it's you.
Yes.
It's either your training program that's no good, or like you said, your management, or just I don't know. And so there's also some scuttlebutt that the people let go were actually we're managers. We're more highly paid.
Yeah. Well, apparently, supposedly, when the story first came out, they said, they're not getting rid of production people. There's a lot of people from engineering and marketing, which again, that
Tesla does marketing. None of this makes any sense to me, man.
They have a whole bunch of people who cold call customers, or potential customers, asking them, hey, I know you're on the waiting list for a Model 3, but we've got a whole bunch of Model S's right now. We can give you a deal on it. No, sorry, we can get you in one really quickly.
Listen, that's not marketing. Those are call center services. I'm very familiar with those. You don't need to have employees for that. You just hire a call center.
Well, maybe that's what they're doing, because the latest story out of CNBC is according to sources inside the company and people that have been let go, it's actually more about cost cutting than about actual employee performance. I mean, they're using employee performance as an excuse to do some headcount reductions.
So what does this tell us? Does this tell us that Tesla's finally sort of facing up to the fact that being an auto manufacturer is kind of hard?
No.
Okay.
I seriously doubt they have acknowledged that yet.
Okay. Is that what the reality is, though? That they're
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a very strange situation, but everything that goes on there is kind of strange.
Yeah, but I mean, they're gonna they're gonna put GM out of business.
Yeah. And so we had some Twitter questions.
Oh, I love the move on, the pivot. Excellent. Okay. Yes.
Let's see. So what do you think of the new Star Trek?
There's a new Star Trek?
Yeah, Star Trek Discovery. It's. I assume from your response that you haven't watched it yet.
So here's the thing. I really don't watch anything. I don't watch Game of Thrones. I don't watch Breaking Bad. I'm just not interested. And I went to film school. I make videos. I don't watch stuff. I read. I listen to podcasts. I really dig Snap Judgment and Backstory. And the pictures are better on podcasts than they are on movies. I don't know, man. It's and sci-fi is like, if we're talking sci-fi, I have trouble with sci-fi. Unless we're talking like weird sci-fi, like Dark Star.
Okay.
Which really shouldn't have ever been like a feature film. Like there are some touchstones like the original Star Wars and stuff. But yeah, I mean, I love how sci-fi is an allegory, and I hope that the Star Trek Discovery is continuing what the original Gene Roddenberry Star Trek started, was using sci-fi as a way to sort of talk about and comment on social problems of the contemporary times, that in a way that's like sort of non-threatening to a lot of people. So you put those issues in consciousness. That's really the beautiful thing about sci-fi. But yeah, I mean, network shows are also like, the dialogue is crappy, the plots are terrible. I have a real hard time with it. I'm such a cynic. I'm sorry.
And I agree with a lot of what you said. I do like some sci-fi. We have been watching Star Trek, the Star Trek Discovery, my wife and I.
So is it good?
And yeah, it's actually really good. The production values are really high. The performances are great. The scripts are much better than average for first year of a new Star Trek series. It's really well executed. And although CBS is doing it, it's only the first episode was on actual broadcast. The rest is only available on CBS All Access.
Oh, that's right. And it was like it's kind of dumb that it's available that way, because there's actually they sort of figured out there's quite an audience that would actually watch this on broadcast.
Well, but the thing is, that's exactly why they did that, because they want people to subscribe to CBS All Access, and someday I might even do that.
Yeah, but CBS All Access it costs the same as Hulu, and you just have CBS programming, and who watches CBS programming?
I know, that's why I said someday I might subscribe to it. But no, it's really, it does have some of that, the allegory stuff that you talked about. But it's more of an ongoing story arc, than most of the Star Trek series in the past have been, where they were, single episodes, that could stand alone on their own. This is a continuing story, as most of the best modern TV shows are, dramatic TV shows are. So I think overall it's really good so far, and really pleased that they haven't screwed it up. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, Star Trek has the fans of Star Trek really love it, and you just looking into the history of like what Gene Roddenberry had done and how it sort of became a show in the first place. Like, I have a lot of respect for Star Trek, and so I like you. I hope they don't screw it up.
Yeah. I'm
still not interested enough to watch it.
That's fine. I mean, my wife and I don't watch a whole lot of stuff either. I mean, we're cord cutters, and so we have a fairly limited menu of shows that we watch, in any given week. And, both of us listen to a lot of podcasts. And
so what are your favorites? I mean, besides Wheelbearings, of course.
Well, yeah, I mean, I listen to that at least 3 or 4 times a week. No, my podcast subscription list is actually pretty long. I listen to a lot of stuff from the Twit Network and from Relay FM. The Accidental Tech podcast is great. I like those guys. And we'll have to get Casey Liss on here one of these days as well to talk about some stuff because he's kind of a car geek too.
Yeah, I think I asked Marco a stupid question over Twitter about like using some with the platform that he came up with. Anyway, like I asked a dumb question. I didn't get a response. I was like, that was probably a dumb question. Anyway.
Okay. So next question from Twitter from DJ Merck asking, how long would you wait to buy one of the new Mazda Skyactiv X engines and to be sure that you aren't a beta tester? Would you lease on day one?
Listen, I bought 2 first-year Volvo S60s. I would just jump right the hell in. Just buy the car. I mean,
what have you got to lose?
Yeah.
What could possibly go wrong? It's got a warranty, right?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, look, if you want the thing, get the thing. You're going to look at the other people who are either just don't have the same level of self-control or caution, and you're going to be envious. So envy yourself. Just get the damn car.
Perhaps we'll get lucky, and by the time they release the new Mazda 3 with the Skyactiv X engine, and I think we're going to see a preview of the new 3 next month at the Tokyo show, or actually I guess it's in a week or two at the Tokyo show. They're going to have a concept to preview that. But anyway. Perhaps they will have a subscription plan in place, so you can just sign up for a subscription and then, just walk away from it if you're not satisfied. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Everybody's doing it.
Yeah. I mean, lease, generally I'm not a huge fan of leasing, but in this case, it might not be a terrible idea.
Yeah. I mean, that was his question, that I saw that earlier. And yes, if you're going to lease, yes, lease it day one. If you're going to buy, okay, using a little bit of caution. Because, the first-year cars of any model are generally quite different from, like, year 2 through 5. And
in this case in particular, because, the engine is so different, I would probably be hesitant to put my money, I tend not to be an early adopter of very expensive objects. I'm an early adopter of more affordable things, but not very expensive objects like cars. And so I would probably be inclined to hold off a little bit on signing up for a car loan for one of these.
Yeah, but coming back to a lease for a 3s, that's not going to be like that'd be $250 to $350 a month, depending on the trim level, maybe, and the amount that you have to put down. Although I think it's asinine to put money down when you're renting a car. That's a whole other episode. With the lease, usually maintenance is covered, so you'd be fine.
No, it's usually not actually. Not with
I'm sorry, lease. Like routine stuff is covered, right? Not like.
It varies from from manufacturer to manufacturer.
Wherein Dan demonstrates his lack of fundamental understanding of what's covered with leases. Yeah.
All right. Last one here. How should autonomous tech factor into Consumer Reports reliability rankings? And this comes on the heels of Consumer Reports releasing their 2017 reliability survey today. Before I jump in this, do you have any thoughts?
So I think if you're talking about reliability, you should consider the actual reliability of the tech, and not the usability. That's a different thing. So reliability in tech to me means like, does it get wacky and reboot itself a lot, or all of those things that make it difficult to use or let you down in a clutch situation. But it doesn't mean the actual like interface, like that's a separate issue to me, is like how easy to use it is versus how actually like how much uptime I guess you have with it.
I mean, certainly the usability part has factored increasingly heavily over the last several years into things like the JD Power initial quality survey.
And it should, like it's a huge issue, and the usability is super important.
Even though it's not, it's arguably a quality issue. I think, the definition of quality in that context has changed a lot over the last 10 years. It used to be that quality was, is it put together right? Does it do what it's designed to do? Regardless of whether you like the way it does it. And that has, the way people have, the responses to that survey have changed, it's shifted more towards design quality rather than functional quality. And so now it's, do you like the way this works? And if it annoys you, then people have been knocking those down in the quality ratings if it's annoying in the way it works, even if it works as it's designed to work. And I think, the issue here, with the reliability rankings, as you said, I think you run the risk of getting into the same kind of situation, looking at the user interface versus the way it actually functions. And I absolutely think we should, factor some of these automation technologies into the reliability rankings. And I very carefully use the word automation there rather than autonomous, because right now there is nothing out in the market that is autonomous. But it's automation technology that's taking over part of the job of driving, not the full job of driving. And I think it's perfectly valid to factor in some aspects of that, let's say, for example, Volvo Drive Pilot, that system, that's their semi-automated driving system, that's supposed to, track down the lane and combined with, adaptive cruise control, to follow the car in front of you. If you read the description of what it's supposed to do and then actually drive it, you find that it very often does not do what it's described as being capable of doing. I found, in driving it, a couple of different generations of it on two different vehicles, that it was, it often, was not able to reliably detect the lane markings and track the lane. So I would call that unreliable. And I think that's perfectly valid to include rankings of things like that in those in the Consumer Reports reliability ranking. Okay.
I mean, I guess one of the things I was thinking of as we talked is a lot of these systems, they lag, and that like it's the processors are slow, or just is trying to do too much and that kind of stuff. To me, that's an issue that. It's not so much reliability, but it's functionality, and like it's a real problem.
I mean,
but I think that should factor in.
The system does not respond when you expect it to.
Right, and so that's to me, that's reliability.
Yeah, I mean, if it's waiting too long to slow down, when the car in front of you slows down, I would say that's perfectly reasonable to call that a reliability issue.
Well, yeah, you can't rely on it. So we'll torture it.
If you can't rely on it to do what it's intended to do, then it's not reliable.
But it's also like when you talk about a reliability issue in terms of like CR with their with the Consumer Reports rankings, you're talking about how a car survives over 3 years, 5 years, 7 years. Those systems are pretty important to how that car ages. And we're seeing that now with our Jeep, where the nav system in the Jeep that we have was at the end of its life anyway. The next year, the 14's got a newer Uconnect system with a larger screen, better processor, just some different control interface. So now it feels really antique, and it can be updated with maps. But like, what do you have to do to update it? Can it accept updates? How long is the automaker going to continue updating and supporting it? And what happens when you do update it? Is it like a phone that, like, the more you update your old phone, the slower and crappier it gets, just because the world has moved on? Those are big deals.
Yeah, and that's certainly I'd say that's increasingly something that you want to consider as part of the overall reliability, or certainly the durability of the system.
Yeah,
maybe not necessarily the reliability, but absolutely the durability. Just as, does the transmission start having problems after 25 or 30,000 miles? If your nav system is no longer really functional after 3 years, that's not very durable.
Yeah. I mean,
So
maybe it's not.
Maybe not reliability there, but certainly durability.
Yeah, and it's a frustration point, and you pay money for that feature. You finance that feature over, 128 months or whatever they'll write you a loan for now. So, if it's useless by the before the loan is over.
I think the upper limit right now in the U.S. is about 84 and 96 in Canada.
96 months.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
It's crazy.
Yeah. So think of it that way.
Almost as long as my mortgage.
Yeah. Seriously. Think of it that way though. Like think of how long you're going to be paying for it and what it's going to be like once you finally own it. If that's the way you go. And if you lease, it's not such an issue. Every 2 to 3 years you're getting into something with a newer piece of technology in it. So, but yes, I think the tech stuff, how long it lasts, how well it works, all of that is, if we're going to start having cars with more of this stuff in it, we already do. If we're going to have cars with all of this stuff in it, it's another area to look at. What's unfortunate is that an otherwise fantastic car can get dinged pretty hard because of its tech. We saw this happen to Ford with like the Fusion with the My Ford Touch and stuff. They got dinged in ratings where the rest of the car was really good, and the tech really brought it down. And if you're not sort of quite an enthusiast consumer, you may not understand why the car was sort of lower on the totem pole than really it might have deserved to be.
Oh, absolutely. So I think that's all we got for tonight, unless you got anything else.
No, I'm done being wordy.
Okay.
So that's episode 43.
We've got an hour and a half in there, so I think that's good.
I think we did a good job. You can tell us if we did a good job. Hit us up on Twitter at Wheelbearingscast. No vowels except for the A in cast. Leave us a review on iTunes. We're on Facebook at Wheelbearings Media. Wheelbearing Media.
Yeah.
We're around. You know where to find us. And our email is wheelbearingscast@gmail.com.
All right. And we will see you in a week or so. Or talk to you in a week.
Yeah. So we'll see you
sometime next week.
We'll do another one again soon. Yeah. All right.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Owning a boat comes with a number of perks, like being able to fling your favorite fishing rod around. And here's another perk. Geico's boat insurance covers your boat and your belongings. And with specialist support from agents that are as passionate about boating as you are, there's so much value that you'll want to high-five someone. But not while you're holding your fishing rod. That's a prized possession. So hold on tight with both hands and keep it covered through boat insurance. Get more with Geico.